me tell you what today's What's Up is. I will care for my neighbor and be a good friend. Can you guys remember that? Our story today is about being neighbors. You know what a neighbor is?
What?
Well, a neighbor is just about anybody around you. But we're gonna learn that in our Bible story today. So what's up?
I will care for my neighbor and be a good friend.
You guys all say it with us.
I will care for my neighbor and be a good friend.
That's what's up. See you later. Whoa!
Oh boy, here we go again. What do you want this time, Inquisitor?
No one questions the Inquisitor. Don't you know this by now? The time is nigh.
The time is what?
Nigh. You know, the time is nigh. That means the time is now. See, here on my watch, it says the time is nigh. No matter, the time has come. Breathe deep. The cool air, that is. The Inquisitor's questions of inquisitiveness.
All right, let's get this over with.
All right, here we go. Number 1. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Number 2. What came second, the bacon or the pig? What came third, the corn dog or the mini corn dog?
Did you not eat breakfast or something?
Wait, what came fourth? The ham or the burger? What came fifth, the pineapple or the bowling ball?
Oh my goodness, you're gonna drive me crazy.
That's what Greg said.
Who's Greg?
Greg is my neighbor. Well, he was my neighbor. I asked him so many crazy questions that he couldn't take it anymore, and he blew up. He exploded.
You made your neighbor explode? That's terrible.
Well, not really. Because you see, Greg was really a piñata. Here, have some candy. He's delicious.
Oh. So your neighbor was a piñata?
Well, it's the only kind of neighbor that I could get. I mean, the house next to mine stays empty all the time. I guess I just asked too many questions. So I bought a piñata and I named him Greg. And I asked him so many questions that he exploded. I think that's a pretty normal day for me, really.
I don't think there is a single normal thing about you. And that's not what a neighbor is supposed to be like. In fact, Jesus asked a question about our neighbors. It's the question that we're asking today. He asked, which would you say was a neighbor?
Well, that's pretty easy. My neighbor was Greg until he exploded. Anybody that lives in the house next to you is your neighbor.
Well, that's one way of putting it, yes. But Jesus meant that everybody is our neighbor. I'm a neighbor. You're a neighbor. They're all neighbors. All the kids are neighbors. And today we're learning about how to be a good neighbor.
Let me guess. Rule number 1, don't blow them up.
That works, but what I was going to say is that a good neighbor has compassion. That means you care about other people more than yourself. A good neighbor also takes action.
That kind of action?
No. I mean, if they see someone in need, they will take action to help that person.
You have astounded me, O Captain Astounder. I shall return to whenceforth I came and bathe my brain in these brilliant bemusings.
Oh, what does that mean?
It just means I'm going to go backstage and think about it for a little bit. But before I do have one final question for you. Okay, here we go.
Oh.
Are snakes just legless lizards, or did God make them by getting some Play-Doh and going like this? What? No one questions the Inquisitor. No! Okay, guys, so our story today is all about being a good neighbor. We've already, kind of talked about that a little bit. So our story is taken from the Bible in the book of Luke. Now, think about this. Is Luke in the Old Testament or the New Testament? Remember our Bible's books of the Bible song? And then we get to Matthew, Mark, Luke. So it's in the New Testament. It's the third book. It's in chapter 10, verse 30 of your Bibles. So Luke walked with Jesus, and he was there when Jesus told this parable that I'm going to read to you, okay? All right. So it's a story about a man who was traveling from one place to another place. And on the way, he got beaten up by some robbers. Some thieves jumped out behind the rocks, and they grabbed him. They took everything that he had, and they beat him up, and then they left him there. And they beat him up pretty badly. He was badly hurt. And then they left. So this man wasn't traveling with anybody. He didn't know anybody. And so he didn't know, there was no phones, of course, so you can't call for help. So he was just hoping upon hope that somebody would come by on this road and help him. Well, after a little bit, somebody did come by. The man that came by was a priest. Now, a priest in the temple is kind of like our pastor, Matt. He's like the one that kind of leads the people in the church and tells them about Jesus. So this priest came by, but you know what? He did not help this man that was beat up. He thought, oh, I don't even want to get involved. I think I'm going to pass by on the other side of the road. I don't know what will happen to me if I help this man. I don't think I'm going to stop. And so he just kept going. Well, this man was getting worse and worse all the time. He had so many sores and so many bruises, and he was bleeding. He was losing a lot of blood. He really did need somebody to stop and help him. So pretty soon he heard more footsteps, and he thought, oh, maybe this man will stop and help me. But this man was a Levite. He was also a leader in the church. And he was like, I am so much in a hurry. I don't have time to stop and help this man. This is going to take too much time. And he kept on going and kept on going. And the man was just moaning in pain. He couldn't even cry out. He was so weakened at this point. But the Levite didn't stop to help him either. That's pretty amazing. These people were church-going people. They believed in God, and yet they didn't stop to help this man, did they? A little while later, when there was hardly any energy left in the man, he heard more footsteps, and he moaned again. Oh! And this gentleman was a Samaritan. Now, a Samaritan is a person that the Jews did not like them. They were mistreated a lot of times. They just were not liked by the Jews. They kind of had an enemy thing going on. But this man was a Samaritan, and he stopped and helped the gentleman. He didn't just have compassion for the gentleman. He didn't just check on him and see how he was. He actually bandaged up all of his wounds, washed them with his water that he was carrying, and then he put him on the donkey, and then he took him into town and bought a hotel room until as long as this man needed to heal. So which of these was a good neighbor, do you think? It wasn't the church-going people, the priest and the Levite. They did not stop. The good neighbor was the Samaritan, who should have not even wanted to stop and help this Jew because they were supposed to be mortal enemies. But he's the one that stopped and helped. So he's the one that is our good neighbor. So I want you to remember, he is called a Samaritan. Can you guys say that? Samaritan. So that was the story that Jesus told about who is our neighbor and how we're supposed to treat them.
Okay, so today we're learning the story of the Good Samaritan, guys. Jesus told this story to a crowd because many of them did not understand that they're to love and to show kindness to everyone, right? Not just your best friend. That's easy to do. But to everyone. Jesus told the story of a Jewish man being beaten and robbed, like we just heard. Several other Jews, including the Levite, the priest, they passed right by him. They did not offer to help him. Do you remember who stopped? Do you remember what we said it was? The Samaritan. That's right. The Samaritan stopped to help the Jewish man, even though Jews were known for hating Samaritans, right? Nobody would have blamed that Samaritan for passing by. We would have probably expected it, right? That's not what happened. The Good Samaritan was the only one who stopped and helped. So Jesus asked the crowd, he's telling this story to a crowd of people, so he asked them, which one would you say is a good neighbor? Of course, it was the Good Samaritan. He was the only one who acted like a good neighbor. We can learn a lot by looking at how the Good Samaritan responded to the man in need. What does a good neighbor do? A good neighbor has compassion. Compassion is a feeling that you have for people in need. Compassion says, I want to help that person. When you see a person who is hurting or in need, you must have a heart that feels compassion for them. If it doesn't move your heart when you see the homeless on the side of the road, the kid who has no friends, or the child who can't afford nice clothes, you should pray that God changes you. A true Christian should be moved with compassion when they see someone in need. And compassion's great, but it's not enough to just feel for the person in need. Instead, you also should take action. A good neighbor does more than just have feelings of compassion for those in need. After all, compassion leads to action. If compassion never leads to action, is the person in need ever really helped? If the Good Samaritan had stopped at the compassion and just felt, oh, I'm really compassionate for what he's going through, that wouldn't have been much of a story. We wouldn't even be telling the story probably, really. But it was that he took action, right, to help this man. He did a lot. So don't just do something, but a good neighbor makes a sacrifice. The Good Samaritan didn't just do something, like stop, say, are you okay? That's something you could do. But he went above and beyond. He bandaged the man's wounds. He put him in a hotel. He paid the bill for the man until he got well. It's no doubt that this cost this man a lot of money, but he was willing to do whatever it took to help the man. Jesus did the same for you and me. He sacrificed everything, including his own life, to save us from our sin. We should follow his example and be willing to do whatever it takes to help those around us who are in need. Whether it's a new kid at school, the next door neighbor who doesn't have enough food for his lunches, or the homeless person on the side of the road. Can you guys think of other examples? We must be willing to help whoever we see that's in need. A good neighbor has compassion for the hurting, is moved to action, and is willing to make a sacrifice. Are you a good neighbor?